Welcome back to Going to the Market. I'm your host, Brendan Herjavec. 2 years ago, there was no such thing as a go-to-market engineer. It wasn't a job title. Today, every founder I talk to is trying to hire one, and nobody quite agrees what it actually is. Is it a salesperson who codes? Is it an engineer who can sell and talk to people? A growth hacker with better tools? Or a RevOps leader with a cursor subscription? My guest today has a unique vantage point on all of this. Florian Kaspar is a recruiter based in Europe who places go-to-market engineers for a living. He sees the candidates, he sees the job descriptions, and he sees what founders are saying and want versus what they actually need. In this conversation, we get into why this role is exploding, the biggest misconceptions within it, and what founders are bringing to the hiring process, the wild gaps between how Europe and North America recruits, and why your resume is quietly losing value. Let's jump into it. Go-to-market engineering didn't exist 2 years ago. Now it became really popular, or at least we're hearing more talked about it. Why do you think, just from your experience on the recruitment side, made this role exist? Was it the fact that you're having now salespeople have become more technical, or was it technical people try to move down the sales? How did you think this really came to be? Because I feel now it's like a unique hybrid role where, like you said, it's a little bit technical, a little bit salesy. You're probably going to talk to clients as well. There's this weird hybrid of tooling, RevOpsy. How do you really think it amalgamated into this kind of unique hybrid role that really didn't exist a few years ago? And why now, almost, in your view?
That's a really good question, actually. I think because the traditional outreach just stopped working, right? So you looked at efficiency scores. I mentioned the cold outreach blast, a lot of sales reps sending lots of LinkedIn DMs. They say, building pipeline, but what they mean is well, what can you do? Send messages or do cold calls? Cold calling is having a bit of a comeback. I hear that with lots of sales leaders that I talk to. And even then, getting a proper number, getting, a connection, all of these things are still not for granted. So I think it's a necessity in that way to make sales more efficient, to up those numbers, and then on the back end stop wasting so much time, right? Because things are moving super fast, and if you have your reps do a lot of admin work, no CRO likes that. So then you try a lot of new tools, and then I think a lot of organizations face the challenge. Hey, we have these tools, they're kind of working. How do we plug those together? We probably should have a guy for that, right? And this is how this was born. It's my take.
Yeah, and I've kind of fell into this role in a very similar way, where we had a complex tech stack and so we need someone to manage how do we connect all the dots, because having 20 reps build their own systems just gets too messy. So I think it's almost the fact that AI made it so possible to build tooling now and kind of be so quick. It almost required the role, because there's so many tools out there. Back in the day was, do you know HubSpot or Salesforce? And that's all, just one tool you need to know. Everything's done through that. Maybe you had a list builder or something, but it was one tool. Now every week there's a new tool, and this became almost like a product-ish role in some sense. But at the same time, what I'm seeing is, this is where I think your view would be interesting, is because the role is so new, oftentimes when I talk to founders or teams, there's a different understanding of what go-to-market engineering is. When you're talking to these candidates, or at least these founders, what do you think is, this is not a loaded question, but a misconception of the role you keep hearing often, or people assume it's something that it's not? Is there something that comes to mind when you're like, that's actually not what you're trying to hire for?
A lot. I think it gets confused with, you remember back when growth hacking was a thing? I think it gets confused with the growth hacker. Kind of like, we have this process, it kind of works, now we need more, to send more DMs and more stuff and faster and slightly better. And I think a couple misconceptions around that. I think actually startups specifically and founders can bring on a GTM engineer quite early, because they can help you datafy your decisions. So actually, the growth hacker, you would say, when there's solid product market fit, business model fit, all of these things are validated, and then you're trying to scale pretty late stage actually. Whereas I see personally the GTM engineer quite early in the journey, in that this person can do a lot more than just sending cold outreach or more of that. And the second misconception then, comparing it to the growth hacker, is it's more so of a process role still. And you brought on product as well, right? So all of the
Mhm.
things in the back end. That's not super sexy work, right? So that's not gonna,
Mhm.
be return of investment very first day, right? So that's things
Mhm.
that are incremental, trying these new tools, validating these tools if they do what they do,
Mhm.
and having a bit of a hygiene there in the tech stack. Not super sexy, but really build a role. Whereas then comparing it to the standard RevOps would be more strategic operational, but we have a real
Mhm.
builder here. So you can bring this person on really early. And what I see is, well, people ask for it once it's kind of late. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm the recruiter and I want to place this
Yeah.
candidate. But that is something indeed I see with these organizations that, hey, they bring it on and then you'll have this person with already a bit of a mess of tools, which is not a problem per se. Just goes to show that it could even bring them on earlier.
And I think I've been seeing that more and more where they go to market role being hired earlier on in the process. They have you have to have some successful product market fit and outreach idea, and then having this. Okay, now how do we not in growth hacks and accelerate it, but kind of connect the dots, streamline it, almost operationalize it, while also understanding how to connect some of the tooling. You, what's
Yeah, and
unique?
so
I
to
remember we
understand
talked
what's
before.
not
Yeah.
working. Yeah. Mhm.
What you I know we talked about before is you've worked in Europe, you worked in the States. Have you found a difference in no, I mean the view of AI? I mean across the pond or across the country, and maybe I don't know, is not specifically maybe about go to market specifically, but have you seen a difference in whether it be recruitment styles in the States versus in Europe, especially around the go to market or AI use? Because I know actually only ever worked in North America, and obviously with the
Mhm.
internet, the world's global. But I'm still seeing certain pockets more focused, like
Oh,
Canada, be more risk averse,
that
much more focused on like
yes.
sales and partnership, or like where in the States it's
Mhm.
spray and pray seems to be more common, or more of these hacky techniques. Have you seen a difference at all between what people are looking for, or how they're kind of developing this role while it's still new?
Yeah, I'm gonna say a couple of things that are super European, right? So I think first thing that comes to
Mhm.
mind, I interview candidates, also North Americans that might have even moved to Europe. So they're kind
Mm.
of in between. I've seen both worlds. First thing that stands out, total comp is a big problem, right? Because I represent only European companies, right? So I don't have
Mhm.
any stakes in North America at all. It takes your salary in half is
Mhm.
still way too expensive for us Europeans, right? So like that's first off the bat. That's just
Yeah.
how these things work. And then you can have a talk around equity, you can have a talk around work life balance or whatever that means to you. But at the end of the day, yeah, to get that salary cut is not a decision a lot of candidates will make. And then the second thing I think in what I've seen in North America, and I did actually hire in house in the Philadelphia area some years ago,
Mhm.
was that well the recruiter kind of sliding into your DMs a lot more accepted. It's like it's I think there's a notion in North America it's just good to talk to a recruiter. Good to have that door open even though you're not
Mhm.
actively looking. So I'm having very strategic, nice talks with North Americans that might be here, even though they're not looking at all,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is fine. That's cool. That's it. That helps me. But on the
Mhm.
European end, I don't know. We have a bad rep. We have a bad rep here in Europe. If you're not actively looking for a role, like tomorrow, there's very unlikely you'll talk to a recruiter. That's a big difference. Same goes actually for the company side. I think it's a bit of a problem on my business development side that also founders take the time and talk to a recruiter here, but they're not actually looking. They're like, I want to check the market. This whole GTM engineering thing, what's your take on it? Even though they have no buying intent. Whereas on the American side, I think if they were to take me on, this is a guesstimate,
Mhm.
right? That things happen just because it's a bit more of a pushy sales culture, I think. So having very nice talks with founders, which is great for my market research. But sometimes you really see, hey, they have no intent of buying any of my services, but I can inform them of what's happening in the market. So that's a plus.
Mhm. It's very similar. I mean, to some extent, what I always say is that the can even Canada U.S. comparison salaries is half still, even though it's maybe an hour drive to go to American office, but it's really that different mindset. Even though it's the largest unguarded border, so it's this unique thing how there is still some cultural pockets on how recruiting kind of growth is and
Indeed.
the
And I
pace of
think it's a lot
expectations
of
or at
it
least
is
risk.
is
Mhm.
is also is also this just the financial situation of these companies. The look at the type of seed
Mhm.
rounding they're raising, right? So how a Series A
Mhm.
looks like in New York compared to Berlin. boy, they have a lot more cash on hand, right? And
Mhm.
they might have a lot more pressure to move as well, right? So that's why they want top talent to move right now. But yeah, just looking at the financials, that when the founder gives me their salary range, it makes sense. It makes sense to me.
I think right now, you're hearing a lot, obviously, AI use and then the I mean, like anything else, there's like the economy and, your graduates and the job market. We always hear from
Mm-hmm.
like, I know we were just talking about how, what is the go-to-market expectation from the employer side? What are you finding,
Mm-hmm.
at least employees who are looking for these roles? Is there a misconception of the value they're bringing to a company? Because from my experience, I'll say kind of hiring some more go-to-market people, it was at least because we're an early stage startup, like they had to do a little more
Mm-hmm.
salesy and bias towards action, where they require someone to
Mm-hmm.
build systems. I'm like, well, you
Mm-hmm.
can, but like that's done now. Let's work on something else a bit
Mm-hmm.
more. So I think
Yeah.
what have you seen from the employee side? Are people looking for roles where their expectations are different, but maybe what they value as a very large skill set isn't as valued at this time, maybe because the role is still new or
Mm-hmm.
because when they're joining an early stage startup, that
Mm-hmm.
micro hyper focus isn't required because you make sweeping changes. Have you seen some not common
Mm-hmm.
misconceptions, or kind of maybe where some of that
Mm-hmm.
employer employee disconnect kind of
Mm-hmm.
forms, maybe on the employee side more?
Mm-hmm. No, I'll bring it back actually to the growth hacker discussion, because I think there's a lot of parallels there that help us understand this phenomena. Yeah, back in the day, the coolest marketeers they called themselves, not marketeers,
Yeah.
called themselves growth hackers, because those were the people that really tried to reinvent the wheel. In a lot of ways, well, with these automations happening, we are trying to reinvent the wheel. So the value that you could bring potentially to a company is astronomical, right? So the if you can combine a legacy tool stack with the new tools, validate market segments, pitch all of that to C-level, and still be on sales calls and understand what's happening, you're delivering a lot of value here, right? And I think the candidates don't understand what it is because they've never seen it in practice, right? So we kind of like, we're
Mhm.
in the ecosystem, we talk to people, we really have an understanding what this is. To a lot of people, GTM engineering is just like, well, GTM is the new sales and marketing, right? So, and then is this a sales engineer, right? So I think a lot of people just don't
Mhm.
get it, which is fine, right? So this is something new. They'll have to see it in these organizations. It doesn't work for every organization, this new type of role, right? Because I
Mhm.
think when I talk to people that right now are in my growth marketers, right? Um, they ask me, well, okay, I can learn, like I'm already using some of these tools, but I'm not really like a builder. I'm more like operational, I execute my campaigns, right? What kind of that, like, does this increase my salary, right? So is this something cool? Like, am
Mhm.
I gonna like move up the ladder if I learn these things? Like very
Mhm.
on like old school questions, right? So AI or not. So it's not really something that's on the candidate side seen as the value, even though I think the right type of company today, even in
Mhm.
Germany, which we're kind of laggards in AI to begin with,
Mhm.
are seeing like this is a really, really, really cool role, but the message hasn't gotten out, especially to the candidate side, because the way this career progression just kind of works
Mhm.
in my parts is people look at to the right, to the left, on oh, this guy got a
Yeah.
promotion. What did this guy do for a promotion? And until this
Mhm.
walk hasn't been walked by the cool new marketers, it's not the thing
Mhm.
yet, even though the salary might be interesting to these people.
It's really funny because back when I was in RevOps, which is now not
Mhm.
cool anymore. In 2025, it's like the hottest new role, RevOps. Now no one talks about RevOps because it's now kind of been amalgamated to go to market to some extent, not on the engineering side as much. But I
Right.
think what's interesting is when I've early stage, at least with the rise of AI, a lot of the go to market engineers I was interviewing, and you kind of touched on this a bit, is they're always like, well, I want to use all these new tools, all this AI, and kind of really be on not the bleeding
Mhm.
edge, but like hyper creative with like unique campaign strategies.
Mhm.
But when I was obviously
Yes.
talking to some other organizations or teams that have a system in place, they're like, yeah, that is a part of the job, but the main job is to like fix what we currently have. So I think this is also one
Mhm.
thing, and you touched on a little bit, is that with any role, even in the exciting ones, there's a lot of boring work. Like, okay, we actually have to clean up our CRM data to some extent. Even though that's RevOps, you don't have a RevOps person, but like, how do we connect our Apollo to our HubSpot to then do like, it's this manual work that's behind the scenes, kind of back office. That is a big part of the role where I think oftentimes both parties, the interviewer and the interviewee, especially when working for startups, there's not really a process. They'll talk about this exciting, we're going to run all these campaigns, but there's
Yes.
still some boring work to do. And I think that's also something where uh, there is still some legacy knowledge that is helpful. especially when
Oh,
coming into a team where you're like
I
a
think
team
it's
of one, where you kind of have to do everything. Mhm.
I think it's crucial. I think there's not a single person I met, even the ones that are working on the youngest of all teams. Just spoke with some agency people that are GTM
Mhm.
engineers for agencies. They're going back and learning Salesforce and HubSpot and these things because they do lead gen for people for companies who then plug back into that. So the legacy knowledge and the nitty
Yep.
gritty of it is indispensable. Like we keep forgetting that because we see a nice demo and we see like a LinkedIn post
Yeah.
where somebody does magic. But hey, at the end of the day, the sales rep will see it in Salesforce. How does it get into Salesforce? You know, so that is huge, and I think that is kind of the well, one of the friction points with the GTM engineering is like how
Mhm.
much is in actual real engineers fixing like ticket wise almost my Salesforce
Mhm.
hygiene, um, and how much is this person a creative person? Right now, the creative kind, of course, kind of dominates the picture, but and I think going forward there will be more operational GTM people as well on
Mhm.
the operational sales engineers, GTM engineers, better said. So that will be a thing more. That's not what you like to pitch, but this is like a
Mhm.
natural iteration of RevOps, and this is where we LinkedIn people drink a bit too much of our
Mhm.
Kool Aid, and I think that's to be expected.
And what's really
Yeah.
interesting, you just touched on, I think when I'm looking at the go-to-market engineer role, and there's sometimes they say go-to-market director or manager, and then there's go-to-market engineer.
Mhm.
Sometimes they
Correct.
differentiate that, but it's almost semantics. But what I find really interesting now, right now, is a lot of those new roles say is okay, background in computer science, years of programming or years of being a developer.
Mhm.
So I assumed
Mhm.
kind of RevOps. So it was a sales rep who was a little technical, went into RevOps. Now I'm almost seeing the
Mhm.
engineers who are like, I don't want to just program, kind of moving into this go-to-market engineer, where it's truly an engineer in go-to-market. So I think that's also an interesting
Mhm.
thing, like you were touching on a little bit, where you have two forces: the creative side or the salesy business side going in, and then the purely engineering side coming in. And especially in the States, from what I've seen, they really want engineers because it's almost like you said, it's almost the ticketing. To some extent, I think that ticketing system where my
Yeah.
system is broken,
Mhm.
fix the system, not necessarily build the strategy. I think that's
Mhm.
very interesting where no one really knows where the, like you said, how you enter this role. The talent is still very interesting because there's no real career path at this time, linear career
Mhm.
path to get into this type of role. So I think it's gonna be
No, I
interesting to
think
see
it's
if
the
the
best
engineer
time.
becomes more, yeah.
It's the best time in a long time to be a vibe coder, like kind of technical, but
Mm-hmm.
not back end technical, right? So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
actually like one of my favorite person to interview because I hear this like almost like yeah, that self-doubt, you know. It's like they went for an engineering degree, they might have done like finished it, but they really don't identify as an engineer. They're kind of like marketing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but are they really creative, right? And then you know this thing pops up where it really meets in the middle and you can do so many great things, and you can design so many workflows, right, that at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day can do great work. So that is the middle part, and this is exactly one of the reasons why I think going into recruitment for me personally is so awesome to hit this middle spot, because it's not as straightforward as you study that,
Mm-hmm.
you do an internship that, and then you work for that. Is probably some bouncing around involved, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you got to catch people at the right time with the right offer, right? But that's then a full-time job, which is mine.
And I think what's really how, I mean, we touched on this, but like more on the
Yeah.
recruitment side now, because I feel like you
Mhm.
said, similar to anything else, a lot of outreach, a lot of reaching out, and now with AI, it's this high volume, relatively low touch. How have you seen the, at least the AI shift, whether it being candidates building their resumes or like recruiters building the job description, not recruiters, but like companies building their job descriptions, where at least
Mhm.
from my experience with startups, be like, hey, AI, build me a sales rep or go to market engineering role, copy and paste it in. How have you
Yeah.
found kind of that market where maybe every resume could be hyper customized, even though in my
Mhm.
mind everyone's doing it, not maybe again, I'm very into AI, so maybe I'm
Mhm.
assuming not everyone is doing it, but like how have
Mhm.
you found that where it's so easy to craft a perfect message, and then for a
Yes.
job on the job side, it's kind of build. They're building job descriptions where they're candidly may not even reading what you're trying to hire for necessarily. How have you been? How has that been shifting, or how have you been able to manage that? Because I
Mhm.
feel it's
Mhm.
just a ton of volume and really noisy, not understand what's going on.
Yeah, JDs and CVs are losing value. I think it just accelerates the type of trend we saw for a long time. Right? For a long time, recruiters have said, "Yeah, the CV doesn't tell the full story," but then proceeds to just like shop around just the CV, right? So um,
Mhm.
it's not that simple anymore. It just doesn't work. So I think the best use cases, like the resume itself is nice, it's cool to have, but I think it's almost gonna be, well, what I've seen in my short recruiting career here is
Mhm.
almost like a creative portfolio. Is the type of automations you've done portfolio, right? Where like, hey, I don't know exactly what you guys are cooking up in your department, but these
Mhm.
are the types of automations I've done. Have a look at it, no matter where you post that or how you make that available, but just like more into that, because a couple lines on a CV are just not gonna cut it. I don't know what you did there. So that is one thing, and then the job description as well. I think this is where again a trend just gets accelerated. Some companies don't give a flying damn, and they will copy and paste that, and
Mhm.
they will get mediocre candidates. And then there's this small bunch, right, where they really, you read the thing and you're like, wow, this is actually like a nice job description, right, with AI or not, but they took the time to really describe their
Mhm.
company and what they're looking for. And I think
Mhm.
that's maybe tops 20% of what I've seen.
Mhm.
And yeah, again, people have been doing this for a long, long time. Now, I guess it just becomes more noisy. LinkedIn, I know, is trying to like clamp down on all of these agents doing these mass
Mhm.
applications, right? So, yeah,
Mhm.
no, I think I love AI, and I'm the first guy who's gonna like on the back end of my own business AI max all the way.
Mhm.
But I must say this in
Mhm.
public: like my best outreach method has been leaving personal voice notes, where I say, "Hey,
Mhm.
I don't know your situation, but looks like you're working on something really, really cool. If you're interested in having a chat about your career, I'm right here with my voice." And
Mhm.
people are giving me the best feedback I've had in my whole recruiting life, right? Because I'm doing something super not scalable, to the extent that I had two people actually question if I had this voice like created over like 11 labs and then put into
Yep.
like a campaign. Like people are so, they're so on their toes. They're like, it can't be that a recruiter actually sends me a voice note. That can't be.
Mhm.
So the bar is really low, and the need for human connection is very much low. So we got to be also, for any applicant out there, be very, very aware what is there to AI max on the backend and what is there to human max personal outreach, making a meaningful connection. Because the CV itself or your LinkedIn profile itself probably is not going to sell itself, right? So there's still a conversation to be had.
What you touched on is something. It's so not. It's funny because I like probably 6 months ago, I was giving a speech to a bunch of students, and they said, like every
Mhm.
student's question, how do I get a job? How do I stand out? How do I upgrade my
Of
resume? I
course,
said,
how
no matter
how would they know? How would they know?
everyone, everyone's be asking the same questions. And the one thing I
Yeah.
said, which again, being selfish because I'm doing this podcast, I like making content, even though it's like I'm not great at it. I wish I was 12 years old getting on like YouTube and because that streamers make so much damn money. But I said no matter what role you're in, especially if you're in product,
Mhm.
you need to have a portfolio like you're an artist or a product like you're a designer. Everyone needs a portfolio, a personal website, and
Mhm.
I mean the classic thing you get back is like, well, everyone has a website. I'm like, no, you'd be surprised how many people who are product people or designers don't have a portfolio. And I said, I've so
Mhm.
many times talking to people or talking to recruiters or talking to even companies saying, oh, this is just some of the projects I'm working on. No one ever really clicks
Mhm.
into them. Sometimes they do, but just to, like you said, just to show this is my thought process cuts through so
Mhm.
much noise because it's, even though it's vibe coded half the things I've built, at least it's that extra step.
Mhm.
And like you're saying, it's that extra step of how do you show you're a real person, like your voice notes. How do you show you're a real
Mhm.
person? You've taken at least 10 seconds to really care about it. And I think I'm still surprised. The same reason it's like you should network. You need to be networking.
Yes.
Networking is always going to work. It's if you know someone, you can get a job. It's just how life works because people hire people they know, and that's always going to be a reality no matter how much AI there is. And it's I always try to deny
Mhm.
that, and throughout my career, it's always worked to just have a personal connection. But I think, like you're saying, building that portfolio, even in a sales job, jobs that you don't think could have one, it's so beneficial and useful. And I think especially on the go-to-market engineering side, it's almost
Mhm.
required at this stage, or at least I'd want to see. How do you think about
Mhm.
solving these problems? Because there's so many new problems, so many new tools out there. And like you said, the CV
Mhm.
is hard to trust because it's so easy to not lie necessarily, but fabricate the good messages I want to hear. It's easy to appease what the job description is. So it's great to
Mhm.
hear that you've also
Mhm.
came to a similar conclusion. Now you need a portfolio um,
You need a
to really
portfolio,
stand
and I
out.
think also with on these you just mentioned that the what kind of tools you're working with, right? So hey,
Mhm,
have I just vibe coded that?
mhm,
I don't think vibe coding is a problem at all, right? So like we expect you to vibe code, right?
mhm,
And I
mhm,
think this goes along use cases, right? So even just yesterday, I was speaking with a growth marketer, and she was like, yeah, I mean, I have some of these cool projects. They solve like the problems I'm working on, but they're not like cool. They're not like using these tools I want to use, right? And I'm like, hey, but you're solving a real problem, right? So like, I know like there's a new tool out there every single day, but for your use case, right, what you're doing today, these are the tools that are necessary.
mhm.
Why overcomplicate these things? Why over engineer this whole thing? Quite literally. So in that case, like as long as you have cool use cases, right, and might even have some cool KPIs and metrics with it, if you have so, right, put those on there, right? So because at the end of the day, the companies want to see that this is like also going into like that this GTM engineer might be super junior people in there, but they might be doing super more senior work in the sense that they're not
Mhm,
just operating, right? It's like the typical entry level roles, like you operate, you push
mhm.
these meta ads or whatever, and then you do small campaigns, and then you kind of upgrade. Well, now actually, like we might be canceling that specific role. You actually get a cooler job still, where you have to define the problem. What's defining the problem, and what's the actual bottleneck, which historically, traditionally, was a slightly more senior role. So you can do that right now. And if this big problem can be solved by a really straightforward, small little Cloud Code vibe coded thing, might be nice. So might be all you need.
It's so funny how many, and like you're saying, it's these small things to you might seem basic. Like I use this all the time. I'm using
Yeah.
Claude Code to update a ticket on like Linear or these other things. But
Yes.
I've like so many founders or other people, everyone's too busy doing their own things that your knowledge set,
Mhm.
even as a junior person, could be so impressive or at least valuable. And I think like you say, I even told people who work for organizations, like the classic saying, like dress for the part, dress for the job you want, but you can also do the job you want and then just show your employer or show a recruiter or another organization saying, hey, I'm in sales. I want to go market
Mhm.
engineering. These are workflows I've built for my
Yes.
personal life. And because thankfully all these tools have free trials, you could set up like I don't know if HubSpot, HubSpot I think has a free trial. Like you could set up a whole system and be like, hey, this is my
Yeah.
interpretation of how to do it. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, you can always dictate the conversation. So it's really, and it's a fortunate and
It's
unfortunate,
huge.
but no matter how much AI we use,
Yes.
it always goes back to kind of, showing off who you are as a person and building
Mhm.
connections and just showing off your work because people are too busy
Mhm.
to dig into a web
Mhm.
to do all this work about you. It's really about that elevator pitch,
Mhm.
as simple or as complex as it is, because it's not easy to do. It's
Absolutely.
not easy, but it's always been
Uh,
valuable. Yeah.
indeed. And I think just whatever project you're working on, just making that somehow visible. Like me as the recruiter, I'm looking for a builder's attitude. I'm looking for somebody who's actually like hands-on
Mhm,
trying new tools, right? And that is impossible to tell
mhm,
from just a straight up LinkedIn page, right? I have no idea. As soon as you start
mhm.
putting that stuff out
Yeah.
there, you become visible, right? So that is the 0 to 1 step. And in a lot of ways that gets your foot in the door, right? So that doesn't have to be super crazy, but just that you're actually reading these things. Because I mean, 80% of the population is
Mhm,
scared to death that AI will replace them, and only 20% actually doing
mhm,
something with it, right? And then as soon as you actually log on to Cloud Code, I think what that makes you 5% of the population still. So
mhm.
um, that in and of itself.
Yeah, I think like it's really just showing their work, doing cool things, especially with go market role because it's so new. It's always adapting. So I don't
Mhm.
hate this saying. It's like the learner's mentality, the builder's mentality, but like similar how I'm
Mm.
doing the podcast and all. Every week now I'm building a new tool. Some tools are relevant, some tools
Mhm.
weren't, but it's just forcing
Mhm.
yourself to build and try, and
Mhm.
then eventually you'll brute force into learning new things. Um, So
I
yeah, but
think so. Yeah,
it's
just being in the trenches. I
yeah.
think that's the only way I get any street cred with like the GTM engineers that I talk to. Is that because because for my own recruiting agency, hey, of course I'm also dabbling in clay. I'm trying to set up these flows. I'm trying to enrich data. I'm trying to reach out to stakeholders. I'm trying to push some messages, right? So like I can some at least relate to what they're doing, right? So yeah, tough to teach. And when I think of your college kids, like it
Yeah.
goes, it's tough to explain to somebody who hasn't seen that, right? So because like yeah, this kind of traditional job market is really tough, right? So how can you move
Mhm.
in ways that are actually going to get you interviews into the right type of companies, right? And the only thing I can
Mhm.
guarantee you is that if people are going to get into GTM engineering, is that they're going to be at
Mhm.
probably very young and fast growing companies and into the latest type of marketing, right?
Mhm.
Because we are reinventing the wheel here, and it's kind of like you're bound to be in the right spot if you manage to get yourself into GTM engineering. It's going to be a very modern, very cool organization across industries, whatever type of industry you're interested in. Of course, B2B SaaS is huge, but I've seen use cases where hey, you scrape patent data off of chemical releases,
Mhm.
right? And we need to reach out on what kind of companies behind that, to government tenders where you want to pitch to the tender, and only when the tender first round is accepted it goes to the sales rep. So like lots of things that are possible, right? And that's I think where the beauty lies.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really the main focus on being adaptable, kind of growing. As we wrap up here, I mean, the classic advice is,
Yes, sir.
for people looking to get into this role, kind of learn about it. Obviously, we're saying try things out, but I mean, this is the hardest question to answer. But what would you recommend for people looking to
Yeah.
actually get into kind of start having these conversations with organizations?
Yeah.
Is there something
Mm-hmm.
that, like we kind of touched on, that is maybe not a misconception, but and maybe you already said this. How do you stand out, or how do you try, especially if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have experience doing it, to get at least
Uh-huh.
a conversation to occur to see if there is a fit?
Absolutely. I think what we said before, building a portfolio would be great. Trying out these tools, awesome. Like do all of that. I think um, in a lot of ways, the more playful and authentic you can do it, the better. Like if I imagine you reach out to a
Mhm.
founder you want to work with and you show them, hey, I reached out to you based on this and this workflow, like just play open cards,
Mhm.
right? Like, hey, this is how I
Mhm.
enriched you. This is the type of data I scraped about your post. This
Mhm.
is how I crafted this very message, right? This is something I could do for you, right? So like
Mhm.
looking at it almost like a business case, right? So like right now I
Mhm.
see you guys have this marketers, right?
Mhm.
Might be GTM engineering, might be something for you where you can stay at the same headcount and get a lot of efficiency gains, right? So of course I'm really biased towards action there, same as my
Mhm.
clients. Like we want to see you kind of
Mhm.
go for it. um, and I think for a lot of uh, here comes a bit of the pick. A lot of the like experienced people already know this and they do this well. When they have a couple of years in the industry, they kind of
Mhm.
have an idea of what inside of these companies looks like. They have an idea how recruiting works. They've talked to a lot of founders before, so they know this. I'm really struggling to convey this message to junior people when they've just like straight out of college, might be an internship or two, and they're very, very hesitant because they don't know what they're doing, right? And
Mhm.
that is a mystery unsolved. But I will say, if you dare to even try, put together an outreach campaign and send it to a founder, you are putting yourself in
Mhm.
the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1% of all applicants that will even send them a personal request and follow up on this application, right? So
Mhm.
just the bar is actually not that high, right? The bar is high for people who just spray and pray applications,
Mhm.
but putting forth a lot of effort into one application a day instead of spraying 100 is definitely the way to go. Yeah.
And I mean, that's how I actually got my first job. I reached out to the founder directly because I
Yeah.
hated, they had a really weird recruitment process. And I said, hey, and they said, well, give us a hack on how you hack a system. And I said, my hack is I'm
Yeah.
emailing you directly. Here's my resume. and I got the job. Well, I got the interview, and then I got the job, but it was just like some initiative to say, and it's a sales job. So they're, especially when you go to market,
Yes.
it's a sales
Oh my
role.
God.
They expect some sales activity. And I think
Right.
that's what
Yeah.
I think that's something that always stands out
Treat it as a
as a
sale.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like that. This is legitimate. I'm bound to get some rejection by the founder, but that first no, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything, right? So I
Yeah.
think,
Exactly.
yeah, that's
Exactly.
actually cheeky. I like that. Yeah, that's
And
your hack.
so I guess as we wrap up here, if people want to, who are in Europe or even wherever, want to get in contact with you, kind of help get placed, or at least learn what you're up to, what's the best way to learn about your story, learn about you, and connect with you?
On LinkedIn, I live on LinkedIn. Florian Kaspar. Happy to connect with anybody, chat about recruitment, and yeah, stay connected like that. I'm really active there. I'm engaging with lots of people there. I love to see what you guys are working on.